It's Elvis Presley, the King, a name known by everyone. He was a force of nature, a legend on stage. Millions adored him. But behind the flashing lights and the screaming fans, what was really happening to the man? What did all that pressure, all that relentless demand do to his body? People saw the jumpsuits, the sneer, the moves, the charisma. They saw the global icon. What they often didn't see was the toll it took. It was a life lived in a fishbowl, under intense scrutiny, with expectations no one man could truly meet. And it chipped away at him, slowly at first, then faster. It wasn't just his spirit that suffered, his very physical being began to unravel. Think about it, the endless touring, the recording sessions, the movies, the constant need to be on. This wasn't a normal job. This was an extreme, high-pressure existence that twisted the very fabric of his daily life. From the food he ate to the sleep he got, or didn't get, everything was dictated by the machine that was Elvis Presley Enterprises. And this machine, built to make a star, ultimately broke the man. He was only 42 when he died, far too young, and many believe the lifestyle played a huge part. How could it not have? Number 18. Could anyone truly maintain a normal diet on the road for decades? Elvis loved comfort food. That's no secret. But the demands of touring and performing made any semblance of a healthy, consistent diet almost impossible. Think about life on the road in the 60s and 70s. It wasn't about organic meals and personalized nutritionists. It was about whatever was available, whenever it was available. Long days of travel, late night shows, and the constant adrenaline crash meant he craved quick energy and comfort. And he had the money to get whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted it. His beloved peanut butter and banana sandwiches, often deep fried, became legendary. His fondness for southern fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and rich gravies was well documented. Larry Geller, his hairdresser and friend, often recounted Elvis's eating habits, sometimes describing binges fueled by stress. When he was stressed or tired, he would turn to food, and not always the healthiest choices. He'd eat platters of food after a show, sometimes in the middle of the night, because his body was still buzzing from the performance. This erratic eating, coupled with high-calorie, high-fat choices, was a recipe for disaster. It wasn't just the weight gain, which became a visible struggle, especially in his later years. It was the internal damage. His diet was high in saturated fats and cholesterol. Imagine the strain this put on his digestive system, his heart, and his liver over decades. The very schedule of his life, dictated by performance times and travel, meant meals were often irregular. He might skip meals during the day, then eat a huge heavy meal late at night, just before trying to sleep. This isn't how the human body is designed to function optimally. Dr. George Nikopoulos, Elvis's personal physician, also known as Dr. Nick, stated in interviews and in his book, The King and Dr. Nick, that he tried to help Elvis manage his diet, but it was an uphill battle against deeply ingrained habits and the relentless pressure of his career. Elvis would try to go on diets, especially before filming movies or major concert tours, but the moment the pressure eased or the stress mounted, he would often revert. The food was a comfort, a familiar anchor in a chaotic life. But how much of his reliance on comfort food was a direct result of performance-induced stress? Did he genuinely enjoy those foods, or were they a coping mechanism he had grown to depend on? And if he had been able to eat a normal balanced diet, would his overall health have been drastically different, even with all the other pressures? Number 17 was constant sleep deprivation, a ticking time bomb for his health. Sleep, or the lack of it, was a major problem for Elvis, especially as his career skyrocketed. The life of a performer is inherently disruptive to a normal sleep cycle. Touring meant different beds every night, different time zones, and often late-night performances followed by early morning travel. Imagine trying to get quality sleep when your body clock is constantly being reset and your mind is still buzzing from the adrenaline of a 2-hour show in front of thousands of screaming fans. The biographers like Peter Guralnick in Careless Love, the Unmaking of Elvis Presley detail Elvis's struggles with insomnia. He would often stay up until the early hours of the morning, watching movies, talking, or just restless. Then he might sleep for a few hours, only to be woken for travel or an obligation. This wasn't just occasional bad sleep, it was a chronic pattern of deprivation. Sleep is vital for physical and mental recovery. It's when the body repairs itself, when hormones are regulated, and when the brain processes information. When you consistently deprive yourself of it, every system in the body starts to suffer. Elvis used sleeping pills to try and force sleep. This became a psychostimulant to get going for a performance, then depressants to calm down and sleep afterward. This chemical roller coaster put immense strain on his body. Chronic sleep deprivation weakens the immune system, making a person more susceptible to illness. It impairs cognitive function, making decisions harder and increasing irritability. It also contributes to weight gain, as the body's metabolism is thrown off balance. His frequent bouts of illness, his mood swings, and his visible fatigue could all be directly linked to this fundamental lack of restorative sleep. The demands of being a global superstar simply didn't allow for the consistent, deep sleep he desperately needed. He was constantly fighting his own biology, but did anyone truly understand the long-term impact of such severe, chronic sleep deprivation back then? Could doctors have found non-pharmacological ways to help him sleep given his extreme lifestyle? And how much did his inability to sleep naturally contribute to his reliance on drugs rather than just being a consequence of it? Number 16. How much did the physical demands of his stage performances wear him down? And Elvis wasn't just a singer, he was a dynamic performer, especially in his comeback years, and during his Las Vegas residencies, his shows were energetic, involving his famous leg shakes, hip swivels, and even karate moves. He would often end up drenched in sweat, having poured all his energy into the performance. This wasn't just singing in, it was a full-body workout, night after night, sometimes twice a night. The physicality of his shows placed immense strain on his joints, muscles, and cardiovascular system. Think about the cumulative impact of hundreds of such performances over his career. Each show was an athletic event. He had learned karate and often incorporated martial arts moves into his stage act, which, while impressive, could be jarring to the body, especially as he got older and gained weight. His legendary jumpsuits, while iconic, were also heavy and hot, adding to the physical exertion. In his later years, his body was already compromised by other health issues, including an enlarged colon and a weakened heart. Forcing himself through these strenuous performances would have exacerbated these underlying conditions. Reports from those close to him, like backup singer Kathy Westmoreland, often described him being completely exhausted backstage, sometimes needing oxygen. Yet, he always had to pull himself together for the next show. The pressure to deliver the iconic performance, to be Elvis, superseded the body's pleas for rest. He was expected to jump, sweat, and sing with the same intensity every time, regardless of how he felt. His showmanship was legendary, but it came at a very high price. But how much of his pain was simply the result of an aging body, and how much was accelerated by the extreme physical demands he placed upon it? Did anyone properly assess the long-term orthopedic impact of his stage moves? And could modifications to his performances have extended his career and life? Or was that simply not an option for the king? And number 15, did the constant pressure to be Elvis break his mental resilience and lead to physical decline? The psychological burden of being Elvis Presley was immense. He wasn't just a man, he was an institution, a brand, a global phenomenon. And he had to embody that persona every single day, every performance, every public appearance. The constant pressure to be on, to be charming, to be charismatic, to deliver perfection would be crushing for anyone. For Elvis, it led to a profound sense of isolation and immense stress. This chronic psychological stress directly impacts physical health. Stress elevates cortisol levels, which can lead to weight gain, high blood pressure, and a weakened immune system. It can also cause digestive issues, headaches, and general fatigue. Elvis, by all accounts, struggled deeply with the demands of his fame. He felt trapped, sometimes even resentful of the expectations placed upon him by Colonel Parker, his fans, and the world. He was a prisoner of his own success. His periods of reclusiveness, his unpredictable moods, and his reliance on medication for emotional regulation all point to the severe mental strain he was under. Marty Lacker, a member of the Memphis Mafia, often spoke about Elvis's struggles with his identity and the weight of his persona. The man behind the stage persona was often fragile, insecure, and deeply lonely. This constant internal battle, this split between who he was and who he had to be, manifested physically. His body was simply trying to keep up with the overwhelming demands of his mind and his career. It's not a leap to connect chronic severe stress to an accelerated decline in physical health, even without other factors. But was there any way for him to escape the Elvis persona without destroying his career? Did his friends and family truly understand the depth of his psychological burden, or were they also caught up in the machine? And could earlier, more consistent psychological support have mitigated some of the physical decline that followed? Number 14. How much did his extensive use of prescription drugs damage his organs and systems? This is perhaps the most well-known and tragic aspect of Elvis's health decline. His reliance on an alarming cocktail of prescription drugs, primarily supplied by Dr. George Nicopolis, known as Dr. Nick, had devastating effects on his body. He was taking sedatives, hypnotics, tranquilizers, amphetamines, and potent painkillers. The sheer volume and variety of these drugs, often taken simultaneously, put an unimaginable strain on his liver, kidneys, and heart. Dr. Nicopolis testified in court in 1981, after Elvis's death, that he prescribed thousands of doses of drugs to Elvis. While Dr. Nick maintained he was trying to control Elvis's addiction by giving him known doses rather than letting him get them from illicit sources, the fact remains that Elvis was heavily medicated for years. The drugs included Dilaudid, Demerol, codeine, Quaaludes, Placidil, Valium, and various forms of amphetamines. This chemical onslaught was not just to help him sleep or calm his nerves, it was also to give him energy for his grueling performance schedule. Stimulants to get up, depressants to come down. The long-term effects of such polypharmacy are well documented in medical literature. Liver damage, kidney failure, cardiovascular problems, gastrointestinal issues, and neurological impairment are all common consequences. And Elvis suffered from an enlarged heart, high blood pressure, and chronic constipation due to an enlarged colon, conditions exacerbated, if not directly caused, by his drug use. The drugs masked his pain and fatigue, allowing him to continue performing when his body desperately needed rest and proper care. This created a vicious cycle where the drugs allowed the demands to continue, which in turn increased the need for more drugs. It was a slow chemical poisoning that ultimately led to his early death. But did Dr. Nick truly believe he was helping Elvis, or was he enabling an addiction under the guise of medical care? Could any doctor have truly said no to the king without facing professional or personal consequences? And how much of his physical deterioration was directly attributable to drug toxicity versus other lifestyle factors? Number 13, did the demands of film production schedules contribute to his physical exhaustion? Before his return to live performing, Elvis made many movies. While not as physically strenuous as a live concert, the demands of film production schedules were still considerable and contributed to his overall exhaustion. Think about the grind, early call times, long days on set, repetitive takes, often under hot studio lights, and the expectation to deliver consistent performances. Many of his movies were churned out quickly, sometimes 3 a year, meaning he went from one set to the next with little break. Filming could involve strenuous scenes, dancing, or stunt work. Even if the roles weren't physically demanding, the sheer hours were. A typical film day could easily be 12 to 14 hours. This meant his diet and sleep patterns were again disrupted. He might be eating catered food on set, often not the healthiest, and his sleep would be dictated by call times, not his body's needs. This period, from the late 50s through the 60s, was critical in establishing many of his poor health habits, as he often used medication to cope with the boredom and grind of repetitive film work. Authors like Jerry Hopkins in Elvis: A Biography describe Elvis's growing disillusionment with his film career, which often involved formulaic plots and forgettable songs. This emotional and mental fatigue would have added to the physical toll. The stress of having to show up and perform, even if he wasn't creatively invested, would have drained him. He was essentially a product, and the film studio machine ground him through the process. This sustained, but less visible, period of demanding work undoubtedly softened him up for the even greater physical challenges of his later concert career. He wasn't just making a film, he was perpetually on the job. But did anyone ever properly track the cumulative hours Elvis spent working, whether on set or in the studio? Could a more selective film career have prevented some of his later health issues? And was the boredom he experienced in filmmaking just as physically draining as the energy he expended on stage? Number 12. How did the lack of privacy and constant public scrutiny affect his health? Imagine living a life where you are never truly alone, where every move is watched, every pound gained is scrutinized, and every public appearance is analyzed. This was Elvis Presley's reality from the moment he became famous. The constant lack of privacy and the relentless public scrutiny contributed massively to his stress levels and altered his behavior in ways that impacted his health. He lived in a gilded cage. Even at Graceland, he was surrounded by friends and employees, the so-called Memphis Mafia. True solitude was rare. This lack of privacy likely contributed to his feelings of isolation despite being constantly surrounded by people. He couldn't go anywhere without being mobbed. This meant he often retreated indoors, leading a more sedentary lifestyle when not performing. He would drive around Graceland in golf carts or stay within his property, unable to experience the simple joys of anonymity. The pressure to maintain a certain image, the lean, handsome, charismatic idol, was immense. When he gained weight, the tabloids and fans noticed. This constant judgment would have fueled his insecurities and potentially contributed to his secretive eating habits or his attempts at crash dieting, both of which are detrimental to health. The psychological burden of knowing you are always being watched, always judged, creates a state of hypervigilance that is exhausting and debilitating. This chronic stress response puts the body into a constant state of fight or flight, which over time depletes resources and wears down organs. In Elaine Dundee's biography, Elvis and Gladys, touches on the profound impact of his early fame and the loss of a normal life, which only intensified as he got older. This wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a fundamental assault on his personal space and mental well-being, translating into physical ailments. But did Elvis ever truly desire a private life, or did he become so accustomed to the spotlight that he couldn't function without it? Could better management of his public appearances have given him more personal breathing room? And how much did this constant scrutiny contribute to his feelings of paranoia and distrust later in his life, further impacting his mental and physical state? Number 11, did the financial demands placed on him force him to keep performing even when his body was failing? Elvis Presley was an incredibly wealthy man, but he also had an incredibly expensive lifestyle and a large entourage to support. Colonel Tom Parker, his manager, was a shrewd negotiator, but he also took a significant cut of Elvis's earnings, often 50%, which was unusually high. This meant Elvis always needed to be working, always performing to maintain his lavish lifestyle and support his inner circle. The pressure to generate income was relentless. It fueled the constant touring, the relentless film schedule in the 60s, and the long, demanding Las Vegas residencies. Even when his health was clearly declining, when he was tired, overweight, and relying heavily on medication, the machine kept going. He was the golden goose, and he had to keep laying eggs. This financial imperative meant that his personal well-being often took a back seat to his professional obligations. He couldn't just take a break, too many people depended on him. This financial burden essentially chained him to his career. The decision to embark on grueling tours in the 1970s, despite his worsening health, was not just about his love for performing, but also a financial necessity. His divorce from Priscilla in 1973 also added to his financial responsibilities. The book Elvis and the Colonel by Alana Nash details the intricate and often exploitative financial relationship between Elvis and Parker, showing how Elvis was trapped by his own success and the contractual obligations Parker meticulously crafted. He was essentially working until he dropped, because the alternative, stopping, was too financially catastrophic for him and his dependents. His body was pushed beyond its limits because the show and the money had to go on. But how much of his perceived financial need was real, and how much was due to poor financial management by Parker? Could Elvis have truly retired or taken extended breaks if he had wanted to, or was he genuinely trapped? And did the Colonel knowingly push Elvis to his breaking point for financial gain, or did he also believe he was acting in Elvis's best interests by keeping him working? Number 10 was the isolation of superstardom, a significant factor in his declining health. Despite being surrounded by people, his entourage, his fans, his family, Elvis was profoundly isolated by his fame. True friendship, candid advice, or just simple anonymity were luxuries he rarely experienced. This isolation is a common theme among superstars and often has severe health consequences. When you are the king, people treat you differently. They defer to you, they tell you what you want to hear. They enable your habits, sometimes out of loyalty, sometimes out of fear, and sometimes for personal gain. This made it difficult for Elvis to receive honest feedback about his health, his drug use, or his lifestyle choices. He was insulated from reality. His Memphis Mafia, while deeply loyal, often facilitated his desires, including his access to medication. Lamar Feek, a longtime member, recounted in various interviews how difficult it was to contradict Elvis or offer advice he didn't want to hear. This isolation fostered a sense of loneliness and emotional emptiness, which Elvis often tried to fill with food, drugs, and fleeting relationships. He missed the simple normal life he once knew. This emotional void contributed to his depression and anxiety, which in turn fueled his self-destructive behaviors. This loneliness itself is a known risk factor for various physical ailments, including heart disease and a weakened immune system. Elvis was perhaps the most famous lonely man in the world. This emotional state put a constant drag on his mental and physical resources, making him more susceptible to illness and less able to fight off addiction. He lived in his own bubble, and that bubble, while golden, was also suffocating. But did Elvis ever truly recognize the extent of his isolation, or did he grow accustomed to it? Could anyone around him have genuinely broken through his defenses without jeopardizing their relationship with him? And how much did this enforced solitude contribute to his perceived paranoia and distrust of others in his later years? Number 9. How much did the constant adrenaline surges from performing impact his cardiovascular system? Every time Elvis stepped onto a stage, especially in his prime and later, during his Las Vegas and touring years, his body was flooded with adrenaline. This fight-or-flight hormone prepares the body for extreme exertion, raising heart rate, blood pressure, and increasing oxygen flow to muscles. For an energetic performer like Elvis, this was a regular occurrence, sometimes multiple times a day or week. While adrenaline provides that necessary burst of energy for a performance, chronic repeated surges, especially followed by rapid crashes, are not healthy for the cardiovascular system. Imagine your heart rate soaring to peak levels, your blood vessels constricting, and then after the show, slowly returning to normal. Doing this night after night for years puts immense strain on the heart muscle and the arteries. It's like constantly revving a car engine to its red line. Over time, it causes wear and tear. And Elvis was later diagnosed with an enlarged heart, a condition that can be caused or exacerbated by chronic high blood pressure and other cardiovascular stresses. His reliance on stimulants to get up for shows would have further amplified these adrenaline rushes, pushing his heart even harder. This constant cycle of peak performance and subsequent exhaustion, chemically assisted, would have put him at a much higher risk for heart problems. The physical exertion of his stage moves, coupled with the adrenaline, was a double whammy for his heart. He was quite literally pouring his heart into every performance, and his body was paying the price. Doctors studying the effects of extreme performance on athletes have shown similar long-term cardiac remodeling. And Elvis was, in a way, an extreme athlete. But was there any way to mitigate these adrenaline surges without dulling his performance? Did anyone truly understand the long-term cardiac effects of constant performing at that level back then? And could a different performance style, less physically demanding, have extended the life of his heart? Number 8. Did the pressure to maintain his iconic image contribute to his unhealthy weight fluctuations? Elvis's physical appearance was integral to his image. He was a sex symbol, an idol, and the pressure to maintain that idealized image was immense. However, his weight fluctuated significantly throughout his career, often due to stress, diet, and medication. These constant ups and downs, the yo-yo dieting, are known to be detrimental to overall health. He would often go on crash diets before films or major concert tours to shed pounds quickly. These diets were often extreme, unsustainable, and likely involved skipping meals or severely restricting caloric intake, which can mess with metabolism. Then, under stress or after the pressure eased, he would often regain the weight, sometimes even more. His love for high-calorie comfort foods, coupled with his sedentary periods when not performing, further exacerbated these fluctuations. The mental burden of constantly worrying about his appearance, especially as he got older and his metabolism slowed, would have been immense. Biographers like Priscilla Presley and Elvis and Me discuss his sensitivity about his weight and how it affected his self-esteem. The physical effects of this yo-yo dieting include putting strain on the heart, disrupting blood sugar levels, and contributing to overall metabolic dysfunction. It also often leads to feelings of defeat and despair, feeding into a cycle of comfort eating and further weight gain. His constant struggle with his weight was a very public manifestation of his deeper internal battles. He felt the weight of the world, and it showed on his body, but how much of his weight struggle was due to diet and lifestyle, and how much was exacerbated by the metabolic effects of his heavy medication? Could a more body-positive approach have eased some of his mental and physical burden? And did the constant public scrutiny of his appearance make his weight problems worse, forcing him into unhealthy extremes? Number 7. How did the persistent strain on his vocal cords from constant singing impact his overall health? Elvis was first and foremost a singer, and his voice was his instrument. He sang for decades, performing hundreds of shows and recording countless songs. This constant, often strenuous, use of his vocal cords placed immense strain on his larynx and surrounding muscles. While singers train their voices, persistent strain without adequate rest can lead to physical problems that impact overall health. Vocal fatigue can manifest as sore throats, hoarseness, and even vocal nodules or polyps. These conditions can be painful and require periods of rest or even surgery. The sheer volume of his work, from intense recording sessions to long concerts, meant his voice rarely got a true break. He was expected to sing powerfully night after night, often hitting high notes and performing with immense passion. This consistent exertion would have worn down his vocal apparatus. Chronic vocal strain can also contribute to general fatigue, as the body expends energy trying to compensate for the discomfort or injury. It can also lead to changes in breathing patterns and posture, which can have ripple effects on the rest of the body. While there's no direct evidence that vocal strain was a primary cause of his death, it certainly would have added to his overall physical burden and discomfort, requiring him to use more energy and perhaps even additional medication to manage the pain or fatigue associated with his voice. The commitment to his craft, to delivering those powerful vocals, was unwavering, but it came at a physical cost. But did Elvis ever receive adequate vocal rest or specialized vocal coaching throughout his career? Could the physical demands of singing have been lessened without compromising his iconic sound? And how much did the discomfort or pain from vocal strain contribute to his overall stress levels and reliance on pain medication? Number 6, did the physical injuries sustained during his career contribute to his pain and reliance on medication? Elvis was not immune to physical injuries. Throughout his life and career, he experienced various bumps, bruises, and more significant injuries that would have contributed to chronic pain and his eventual reliance on medication. For example, he injured his knee during a karate exhibition in 1973, which caused him considerable pain and impacted his mobility on stage. Such an injury, on a body already under immense stress, would have been debilitating. He also suffered a serious head injury in 1967 after falling off a toilet at home, rendering him unconscious. While the immediate effects seem to pass, some speculate that this injury may have contributed to later health issues or exacerbated existing ones. There's also anecdotal evidence from his entourage of various sprains, strains, and general aches and pains from his energetic performances or everyday life. Any injury, especially one that leads to chronic pain, necessitates pain management. For someone like Elvis, already predisposed to seeking quick fixes for discomfort, this often meant prescription painkillers. These drugs, while effective for pain, often come with significant side effects and the risk of addiction. An injury that might be manageable for an ordinary person could become a gateway to increased drug use for Elvis, especially given his existing habits and the high-pressure environment he lived in. Each new source of pain added another reason for Dr. Nick to write a prescription, further spiraling him into polypharmacy. These injuries weren't isolated incidents. They were absorbed into a body already breaking down, further accelerating its decline. But how many undocumented injuries did Elvis suffer in his career that went untreated or were self-medicated? Could more aggressive and less drug-reliant pain management strategies have been employed after his injuries? And did these physical injuries lead to a deeper psychological pain, feeling his body was betraying him, further fueling his drug use? Number 5. How much did Colonel Parker's relentless booking schedule push Elvis to the brink? Colonel Tom Parker was a manager unlike any other. He was singularly focused on maximizing Elvis's earning potential, and his strategy was relentless work. This meant back-to-back films in the 60s, and then, after the 68 comeback special, an exhausting schedule of Las Vegas residencies and cross-country tours in the 70s. This relentless booking schedule left Elvis with little time to rest, recover, or simply be a normal person. Parker famously booked Elvis for multiple shows a night, sometimes back-to-back during his Vegas runs. Then, he would transition almost immediately into grueling road tours, sometimes performing in different cities every night. There was little concept of downtime or burnout. Elvis was an asset, and assets needed to be working. This constant grind meant that any underlying health issues were ignored or masked, and any chance for Elvis to get proper, consistent medical care or lifestyle adjustments was severely hampered. Jerry Schilling, a close friend and member of the Memphis Mafia, often spoke about the Colonel's unwavering focus on the business aspect, sometimes at the expense of Elvis's well-being. Parker believed that keeping Elvis working kept him out of trouble, but in reality, it likely pushed him further into it. The lack of control over his own schedule, the feeling of being a cog in a machine, undoubtedly contributed to Elvis's stress and desperation. The relentless pace, year after year, slowly but surely wore down his body and spirit. He was physically present, but his vitality was being siphoned away by the unyielding demands of his manager. But did Parker genuinely believe he was acting in Elvis's best long-term interests by keeping him so busy? Could Elvis have fired Parker, and what would the repercussions have been for his career and mental state? And how much did Parker's business decisions contribute to Elvis's drug use as a way to cope with the relentless schedule? Number 4, did his unique, high adrenaline lifestyle lead to a disordered perception of health and well-being? Elvis's life was anything but normal. From a young age, he was thrust into a world of extreme highs and lows, adoration and scrutiny, intense work and periods of excess. This unique high adrenaline lifestyle likely led to a disordered perception of what constitutes normal health and well-being. What might seem extreme to others became his baseline. When you live a life where you are constantly performing, always on, and surrounded by enablers, your internal compass for what is healthy can become skewed. His body was used to operating on adrenaline and artificial stimulants. The natural rhythms of hunger, sleep, and energy were constantly being overridden. He might have genuinely felt that his reliance on medication was simply what was necessary to function in his demanding world, rather than a dangerous addiction. This distorted reality would have made it incredibly difficult for him to recognize his own physical decline. When you are always feeling tired, anxious, or, in pain and constantly masking it with drugs, it becomes hard to distinguish between normal fatigue and serious underlying health problems. The constant adoration from fans, the endless energy of his performances might have fooled him into thinking he was invincible, or at least capable of pushing through anything. Joe Esposito, another close friend, often mentioned Elvis's belief in his own resilience. The very nature of his career demanded an almost superhuman effort, and he might have genuinely believed his body could simply keep up, as it had for so long. But did anyone in his inner circle have a truly healthy understanding of his situation to offer him a reality check? Could he have ever truly stepped away from that high adrenaline life and found a more balanced existence? And how much did his fame prevent him from ever truly understanding what normal health and happiness felt like? Number 3, was the lack of consistent preventative medical care amidst touring a critical factor in his decline? For someone with Elvis's resources, one might expect top-tier preventative medical care. But the reality of his touring lifestyle meant that consistent, proactive health management was often impossible. Instead, his medical care became reactive, focused on managing symptoms and enabling performance rather than addressing underlying issues. When you're constantly on the road, seeing different doctors, or relying heavily on one physician who travels with you, the continuity of care suffers. While Dr. Nick was with him for years, the focus was often on providing what Elvis needed to get through the next show, which often meant prescriptions. There was little opportunity for comprehensive physicals, in-depth diagnostic tests, or long-term treatment plans that would have been standard for someone with his emerging health issues. For instance, his struggles with an enlarged colon and chronic constipation were known, but the demanding schedule meant sustained treatment or lifestyle changes were difficult to implement. The medical support system around Elvis was also compromised by his fame. Doctors, even well-meaning ones, might have felt pressured to cater to the king's wishes rather than enforce strict medical advice. The environment around him was geared towards maintaining his performing schedule, not necessarily his optimal health. This meant that symptoms were often treated with medication rather than delving into root causes and implementing sustainable solutions. The book Elvis, What Happened? By Red and Sonny West and Dave Hebler, though controversial, gave early insight into the enabling environment around him regarding his drug use and health. Without a strong, independent, and preventative medical framework, his health was left to deteriorate in the face of immense demands. But if Elvis had received consistent, truly preventative care from a team of independent physicians, would his life have been significantly extended? Were there doctors who tried to intervene with stronger advice, only to be dismissed? And how much did the culture of the music industry at the time contribute to this reactive, symptom-focused approach to performer health? Number 2, did the constant battle against boredom and the search for stimulation contribute to his destructive habits? Despite his extraordinary life, Elvis often battled profound boredom, especially during downtimes between projects or even within the repetitive nature of his film career. For a man who thrived on excitement and performance, the lack of mental and emotional stimulation could be agonizing. This constant battle against boredom and the search for something to fill the void often led him down destructive paths. He would engage in elaborate games, pranks, or impulse purchases to create excitement. But when these distractions weren't enough or weren't available, he often turned to chemical stimulation. The amphetamines could provide the energy and mental buzz he craved when he felt sluggish or bored. Conversely, when he was overstimulated or unable to quiet his mind, sedatives offered an escape. This wasn't just about coping with performance demands, it was also about coping with the emptiness of not performing or performing in ways that felt unfulfilling. The nature of his fame also restricted his ability to pursue normal hobbies or intellectual interests without scrutiny, limiting his outlets. He was fascinated by spiritual and philosophical texts, reading extensively, but these were solitary pursuits. The external world, the real world, was largely denied to him. This created a vacuum that drugs often filled. Authors like Alana Nash have explored Elvis's complex inner life, including his spiritual searches and his struggles with identity, suggesting a man deeply restless and often unfulfilled beneath the surface. This constant internal battle against boredom, fueled by a life of extremes, undoubtedly pushed him towards the very substances that ultimately destroyed his body. But was the boredom a symptom of his underlying psychological issues or a direct result of his unusual lifestyle? Could a more engaged, creatively fulfilling career have kept him from turning to drugs to escape? And if he had found healthier outlets for stimulation and fulfillment, would his overall health trajectory have been drastically different? Number 1. What unknown biological factors were at play, exacerbated by his extreme lifestyle, leading to his early death? While much has been attributed to Elvis's lifestyle, diet, and drug use, there's a growing understanding that underlying, perhaps undiagnosed biological factors were also at play, which were severely exacerbated by the extreme demands of his life. His body was already predisposed to certain conditions, and the celebrity lifestyle acted as a catalyst, accelerating their progression. For instance, medical reports after his death revealed an enlarged heart and significant arteriosclerosis. His chronic constipation, a lifelong issue, was later attributed to an enlarged and twisted colon, a condition known as megacolon. While drug use certainly worsened this, some researchers now believe he may have had a genetic predisposition to this condition, or perhaps even a form of celiac disease. There's also speculation about alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency or other genetic predispositions that could have impacted his liver or other organs. Dr. Nikopoulos, in his defense, later suggested that Elvis suffered from bone disease, diabetes, and glaucoma, all conditions that would have contributed to his overall pain and deterioration, and which could have been genetically predisposed. The immense stress, the poor diet, the constant medication, and the lack of consistent, holistic care would have put his body under such strain that any latent genetic vulnerabilities would have been pushed to their breaking point. His body was fighting multiple battles, some visible, some hidden, all at once. The life of Elvis Presley didn't create these predispositions, but it undoubtedly turned them into critical, fatal conditions at an accelerated pace. His body simply couldn't withstand the combined assault of nature and nurture. But what precise genetic predispositions did Elvis carry, and could modern medicine have diagnosed and managed them differently? Was his early death inevitable given these underlying biological factors, regardless of his lifestyle? And how many other celebrities, pushed to similar extremes, are unknowingly accelerating their own genetic health time bombs?